What's up, guys? Steven here. Kickstarting the fucking Ruthless execution series once again. I guess I must apologize for essentially having not had it going for such a long time. It's just been so much that's happened since, obviously. Kind of started getting weird panic attacks, depression, anxiety, blah blah blah, and then just essentially getting to a point where it was just dealing with that, and then school, right? So a lot of like my creative juices have not been squirted out in the amount or capacity or volume that I'd like it to, simply just because of those things. But seems like I finally kind of gotten a better handle on those aspects of my life, and going forward have found a way of like streamlining everything once again. And but who knows, it's like with life and everything. Sometimes you gotta be running sprints, sometimes you gotta be running marathons, sometimes you gotta be doing fucking bear crawls. So it really fucking always just depends on what the moment at hand demands from you. But I'm just really happy. I feel like I'm in a really good place in my life right now. And it's crazy how, like, despite all that, I've still just kind of found this weird, goofy, kooky way of maintaining that solid habit of, like, jotting every fucking thing down. Because oftentimes, even though I'm like, oh, I'm going to remember. So seeing that in effect has been cool. Currently, as it stands, back on my 4-day-a-week regimen, and then plus the 2 extra soccer training days. So the 4 days a week doing the workout of the day: chest, back, shoulders, legs, and then arms, right? Monday through Thursday in that sequence. And then also, obviously, before every workout, starting with like a 3-mile run. And it's been pretty cool sticking to like a 3x10. And it's kind of funny because at the start of this week, I've been planning. So at the end of last week, I was thinking about going to 3x5s so I could just jump up in weight. But I felt something told me was like, it would be better for me to essentially actually just build up that strength endurance first, right? Especially since I'm cutting, right? So the way I see it is like, it's almost as if you have, and I'm so glad I'm thinking about this because it's another concept I've been wanting to just blurb out there, but I just didn't have like a vehicle or a way of putting it out. And it's in relation to metallurgy. By the way, shout out to fucking Forge and Fire. This is dope ass fucking series channel on this series on the History Channel that essentially teaches you how to make knives. So like you got all the blacksmithing niggas on there and the OGs of like fire bending and metal bending, and they teach you. It's like you learn and pick up so much to where you can just be really fucking deadly. But because there's so much precision and like nuances tied to the art, it's really beautiful the way that they laid out the show. There's like a sort of evolution and a progress in your understanding of the depth to how much it covers. But why I alluded to that is essentially, to kind of briefly slide tangent, the concept of cooling, right? Think of just building a chip, for example. Their idea was that, and you might have also heard of this concept of liquefaction, right? What you're trying to do is, if you heat up the metal, what happens is at some point or another, it's going to actually start to boil, right? But there is this art form to where what you're trying to do is maintain it in that state and then mold it, right? And then allow it to solidify again, so the temperature decreases, right? And so what happens is you're it's a rock, right? You melt it, the rock now becomes loosely formed, and then you allow it to condense again, right? You melt it, temperature increases, it becomes loosely formed, you craft it, and then you allow it to condense again. And slowly over time, what happens is it expands over a surface area. Now, bringing it back to a chipset, the idea is to essentially get to a point where you're operating in a range of conditions to where it never overheats, but at the same time, it's always working at its most, I guess, the maximum level of output that it can perform at that moment and point in time. And so what that means is that your chip won't ever burn out as we commonly see, but at the same time also because of this metallurgy and liquefaction. And again, I feel myself going into a side tangent because when I crystal clear had the first time this idea, there was a more stringent point to it, and I'm hoping I get to it. But the idea is essentially you're trying to essentially always work to where you're just slowly allowing it to expand over time, without ever just letting it burn out. And so what that does is it increases the longevity of the particular substance, the material, the chip at hand. And it also deals with all these issues that we are dealing with when it comes to adding extra components in a system to essentially deal with cooling effects, right? So now that was kind of what I picked up from Forge and Fire, and I am now trying to come back to how I got onto this topic. Does anyone remember? I guess we'll just have to let that one go. But essentially, that's one of the things that I've had in my mind recently, and I just kind of saw how that principle really applied to a lot of things, especially just even in like one's own particular work rate, right? How it's not always just about like doing or spinning your wheels as much as possible, but sometimes you almost have to like go with the tandem of the flow of the moment that you find yourself in. So that way, like the way that you're circling with the moment at hand is almost flush in a way that almost seems impossible, right? Like you're rowing with and not just constantly fighting against the current or against the wind. And that's really something, I guess, if you could ask me what I've been up to, it's pretty much that. Because I just kind of found myself realizing that even though I have so much energy at hand and I could literally just be moving at the same level of activity that I had been, it was almost wiser in the sense that I was able to pick up on much more by just taking that extra pause, if you will. And in that, I can almost kind of start getting glimpses of ideas of all the shit that like our parents would try to tell us growing up, like pay attention to what you're doing, like, you know, be polite. It's about the little things, because all those small little dots all of a sudden start connecting to like massively impactful things that have dramatic results on whatever it is that we're doing. So that's been that. On top of that, oh yeah. So I was talking about strength endurance, right? So The concept is that you have people like to divide into two tanks, right? They talk about like short twitch muscle fibers and long twitch muscle fibers, meaning there's one that like you essentially tap into directly, right? Like when you're sprinting, right? And that's like your, if you want, your quick access energy source. And there's another one that kicks in when you're going for the distance, right? But going back to the metallurgy concept, what I've come to realize is if you can actually train yourself to where you're always pushing that short tank, if you will, to near, if you want, burnout rate, but never getting there, what will happen is you'll get close and then you'll let yourself cool down, and then get close and let yourself cool down, and get close and never let yourself cool down. And what will happen, it's almost like you start cold, like kicking in this like self recovery process that your body actually has the potential of doing. It's like this active healing, right? Some people have mentioned as like active recovery, right? But it's like this, it's like your body knows exactly when too hot's too hot. And so it starts kicking in all these physiological processes. Sometimes you're running and you feel like this, like also like if someone just kind of hit you in the fucking gut and you take like this huge gasp, right? That's literally your body just soaking or squeezing itself for water, right? While simultaneously just burning pure amounts of fucking body fat. It's actually a good thing. It's just a matter of like the maturity that you have towards handling that physiologically, if you want, intense experience, right? Little things like that. So the point is, by doing that over and over, what actually happens is that tank actually increases, because you're almost, it's like the fact that you're pushing it to its limit makes it to where it stretches, right? And over time, you actually end up never ever having to like tap into the secondary tank that we mentioned previously. And that was kind of my reference to the metallurgy concept. Over time, as opposed to where like you will see it in the show, right? They get it so hot, and then like because it's way too hot and like they cool the metal way too quickly, it actually caused like irregularities in the, if you want to call it, exoskeleton of the blade itself, right? Instead of like really taking their time and like taming the fire, like dipping it in the water as opposed to just like drowning it, or like really just like sculpting exactly the parts that they wanted to cool down, it actually made it to where their blade, instead of being straight, just starts being bent, right? And like it's really cool because then you are able to like actually have insights into like cultures and like how, for example, why did they come up with the idea of like a curved or sickle shaped for a scimitar, right? Or shit like that. And it's really fucking dope because you pull that into like, oh, how does like a fucking geometric shape at its primal fucking form become when it's in that loosely formed state, as I mentioned? If you take something that's primally triangular, what happens as it literally starts to boil down, right? And it actually gives you really cool creative design insights and concepts and things you can build off of when it comes to other things, right? Product design or whatever, however you want to take it. Yeah, I hope I didn't lose you, but that's really like all the shit I've really been geeking out on. And it's kind of fun because in this, I guess you want to say, soft pandemic, where everything is essentially almost as if reverse engineered to have you look at things from a more deeper approach or perspective. It's been really genuinely fun to see how like that whole how stuff works, like childlike jovial attitude to like everything, especially the things that you didn't really think or so like minute or like full of like minutia really actually are, right? So that's really been cool. And then also just kind of seeing how like because of that we're also just forced to revalue what it actually means to look at something from our own perspective, right? Like what is the definition of my perspective? What is the definition even of something that I see? Like what makes up the way that I come to that conclusion, right? All these small things that we kind of just autopilotly just never really take the time to stop and think about. But yet, as we're seeing, right, with like what we're seeing has like bias in any form, whether it's ageism or racism, even sexism, having these massive negative manifestations. And I don't know, I'm literally really grateful to be alive because, again, like, you just think of like your fucking grandfather that like just slept through the mud to learn algebra. And you were able to like jump into another career just like with YouTube University, or as I put it, at the click of a button. It's such a fucking breath of fresh air, and it's like a game-changing time to be in, right? So, yep, that's pretty much what I've been up to. Really planning on like doing more of these videos. Also, it's just kind of just been playing with like different shit, like the Robinhood app. It's really fucking lit. It's like, fuck, dude, a lot of really cool companies are like really cheap. You're reading shit. Like, now is a really good time to do a lot of things. But yeah, it's been that. I guess also, for me, the best part is the fact that like, it's almost as if this year, somehow by some like magical serendipity, it's summer all year long. So there's like no rush for anything. Anyways, hope you guys got something out of this. And as always, swag the fuck out.
Super Mario.
T. This activist, by the way, I promise. Oh God. Okay, my money way longer than a NASCAR race. I told her keep going on the gas for the brakes. Only here for one night, let me put it on your face. Let a nigga nut, only way I go to slay. Ruler rockin' know the Frank Mueller. I know some hoes with good ass, fuck a tutor. So many hundreds, how the hell I'm gonna lose them? Put me in the jacket, on the rape, and now I'm cool. Play with my money, I'ma let a nigga do it. Play with my money, I'ma let the nigga do it. Play with my money, I'ma let the nigga do it. Play with my money. Play with my money. Play around my cat. Hit up in about a bag. In the store, did that. Pull up, I'm not a cab. She know she got a nipple bag. She know she gotta keep it back. She know I gotta keep me some cash. She know she gotta hop on top of dick. She know she gotta ride a motherfucker. Her mama done walked in, but it's too big, she can't hide the motherfucker. Even if she divided the motherfucker. Man, even if she minus the motherfucker. Join in, get the mileage, motherfucker. I ain't gon' disguise it, motherfucker. Nah, shop at Sackfield, flow on that piff. Yeah, I'm that swift, ask her and him. Yeah, ask them, put them both on them. Put a choker on, let them choking on. All my tourists fall, yeah, they got it all. Daughter sexy and my son got the bra. Spit rats on my son and the squad. Daddy boy never played with toys. Man, I play with him. night, let me put it on your face. Let a nigga know